The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Podcast Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World. Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, where we'll be discussing tonight, as we record this, it's night, The Secrets of Jurassic Park 2, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this Steven Spielberg movie. And as you'll all remember, we recently discussed Jurassic Park 1. We're making our way through the Jurassic Park movies, and tonight we're discussing Jurassic Park 2. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas and Herho. Hi, Thomas.
You got it.
I got it. Been practicing.
How's it
going? Good. And Father Michael Gossett. Hi, Father Michael.
Hi, good to see you guys.
So I'm glad to have you both back here with me on this show. We've already talked about Jurassic Park, and now we've returned. Like Ian Malcolm, we have returned to the place. Well, we didn't vow never to come again, but apparently he did. But let's get to that in a second. Let's talk a little bit about the background of Jurassic Park 2. So Jurassic Park 1, big success, everybody loved it. And then they went to Michael Crichton and said, "Okay, give us another one so that we can make another movie." And he said, "I don't do sequels." And they finally convinced him to write another book. So then he writes the book, but the book has the plot of the book. Apparently, have either of you read the book?
Yes, I've read both the original Jurassic Park and this one.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. The plot of the book, like the first book, the plot of the second book is not really at all connected to the plot of the movie, right?
No, it's very different.
Okay, that's what I thought. There was a very interesting article I read about Michael Crichton and the studio and Steven Spielberg. Folks, you'll have to excuse me. I'm dealing with allergies, and I'm going to try my best not to cough into the microphone, but I'll do my best. Anyway, he was dealing with the studio and just the fact that he writes books and Spielberg makes movies, and they share a topic, and that's pretty much it. That's
pretty much the extent of it, yeah?
Yeah, he wasn't all that happy with the result, but there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So there are basically two ideas that were kept from the book, were the fact that they were on a second island. We're on Isla Sorna on this one.
Right.
And at one point, a trailer is dangling from a cliff being attacked by T-Rexes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all that's from the book.
That's not right. Yep.
Everything else is completely different. I mean, the fact is in the first book, John Hammond dies, right?
Yeah, and then there's also some interesting stuff that they do. They take some things out of the second book that they end up using for the third Jurassic Park movie, and it's fun to watch what actually worked really well, and they should have done in the second movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because the second movie is a dark story. It's a very dark movie. And I think, from my opinion, and you guys can give me your opinion, in my opinion, it's not as good as the first one, because despite the horror and violence in the first movie, there was always a bit of adventure and a bit of lightness to kind of temper the darkness. In this one, we have Jeff Goldblum with his admittedly snarky, funny dialogue, but that's not enough to really lighten the mood at all. And in fact, everybody in this movie except for Ian is bad. Like they do, well, there's a couple of minor characters who aren't, but like all of the major people in this are just dumb about the dinosaurs, right?
No, I think it's an interesting take on like the thing I compare it to whenever I talk about it is it's like they were trying to move for kind of a Heart of Darkness kind of moment where that Joseph Conrad book where it's they as they travel further down the river, they go deeper into the darkness of the human soul, and that's where it feels like it was trying to go, but then it got lost along the way in this this kind of action figure-y, toy sales kind of experience.
And I think one of the great things about the first movie was the sense of wonder over the whole thing. I mean,
right.
Even the soundtrack pulls you into that. Just, this is amazing. There's dinosaurs, but really throughout this whole movie, there's some good scary parts, but humanity doesn't look that great, and they're just, nobody's really doing good things. They're kind of all out for themselves.
Right. The first movie was essentially herbivores versus carnivores, or plantosauruses versus metasauruses, if you want to use that term.
Right.
Whereas this film is hunters versus gatherers, or hunters versus those who you could say those who acquire for zoos versus those who study in their habitat. So it's a different kind of conflict here, and it's almost an environmental message. I mean, in the first Jurassic Park, there was kind of a "don't mess with Mother Nature" message, or she'll bite your head off, literally. Whereas this one is even more explicitly a don't exploit nature versus what we do is which we're studying and preserving the idea.
Right.
So
yeah, I thought it was so tough because there was a beautiful movie buried under this thing.
Right.
And I really do, like, there were a lot of moments where I feel like some of the concepts could have been explored better, and they just ended up being so cheesy because the characters were so flat. And and that's one of the things that you saw in the first movie, that the characters were very complex. They were very rich. And I think the last time we talked about how much depth there was to everyone's character. Everyone had some compelling reason that they were doing things. And then when faced with the actual dinosaurs, they changed. They had a realization about themselves or about the dinosaurs. Whereas in this movie, it's just kind of like, nope, the hunter is the hunter. And that's his character all the way through.
Yeah, they're very much one-note characters. And once we figure out, this is their stereotype, they stick to that through the movie. There's nothing much more to expect.
The nice thing, the one thing, nice thing that they do, well, not just the one. There are, like you said, there are very nice beats throughout this movie, but there's not a cohesive whole. But one of the nice things I liked was how they expanded Ian Malcolm's character to now make him a father. In the first movie, he was just sort of a womanizing cad, and he was that quippy TV scientist sort of guy. But this, he's been changed by his experience in the first movie. That's a very clear beat that they want to make. But also, now we find out he has a daughter, and he's not been a very good father. And here's his opportunity to be a better father than he has been. And throughout the movie, he is trying to take care of this girl that is his daughter. And that I like that. And again, I've seen this movie, many years ago when I was a young man versus today when I am the father of a child about the same age. Gives me a different perspective. And it's that is something that is a difference that I did like in this movie. Well, you were speaking earlier about other differences. One of the differences is that they decided that, because they didn't have the wonder of the dinosaurs to work with in the, like that, the newness of the dinosaurs, they had to bigger, more dinosaurs, and which eventually by the third movie that translates into new manufactured dinosaurs.
Right.
We have to get even scarier types, but this one, it's just more of them. So not just one T-Rex, now we have two T-Rexes, that sort of thing. So they have more CGI and more animatronics, including apparently a 9.5-ton T-Rex that literally, if stepped on someone, could kill them. I mean, it was literally like having a T-Rex on set, sometimes they said. So I thought that was very interesting. And so it takes place on, we said, Isla Sorna, which was, John Hammond explains in the beginning, it was Site 2, the second, the backup site, and they made up something that just totally, it didn't really fit with the first movie, because in the first movie we saw them hatching the dinosaurs on that island. Now we're told, no, they were hatched on this other island, and then moved later. So, we just we have to put a pin in that, move on. But they start the movie with this scene of this little girl with her family getting attacked by these small dinosaurs on the beach. This scene was actually supposed to be in the first movie, but it had been cut from that because it was too dark. So it's
right.
interesting choice that 4 years later they decided, well, it fits now, and we put it in this darker movie.
It's a strong start too. I mean, it's a very dark scene, and if they want people to go into this afraid of the dinosaurs and afraid of what they've unleashed, I mean, that really does capture it. And I think it's a good start to the movie into that kind of danger, but they don't maintain that level of intensity as they go forward.
Right.
No, and see, that's the thing that really bothered me. I can, this movie's all about parenthood. Like that's the underlying theme behind the whole thing, because you have Malcolm's character with the daughter, and then you also have the T-Rexes chasing after their child. And so there's that constant interweaving of the parenthood theme. And, about 10 years before this movie came out, the ultimate parent versus parent movie came out, which was Aliens, where Sigourney Weaver's character Ridley is up against the mother alien,
right?
And it's such a fantastic, high intensity, very very creepy, very scary. Never lets down on the intensity until that final moment when there's the giant battle. That this movie leaves so unsatisfying, because it just keeps going in and out of this. Oh, this is really intense, and then we've got this big moment of dialogue where we're going to sit around and talk, and then we go back to this really intense moment, and it never keeps building on that intensity the way it should.
Mm-hmm. And the pacing is off.
And the pacing's terrible, and then you get to the final showdown, and it's really just kind of a luck of the draw how they end up winning. There's not like a big battle that they actually win. It's just they managed to trap the T-Rex by dumb luck almost.
Yeah, there's a lot about that ending that doesn't make any sense. So let's kind of work our way to that. But you're right. One of the things about this opening scene that kind of bugs me is that it sort of banks on making the parents of this little girl unlikable, sort of almost like she deserves it because they're these idle rich people. Because they're obviously very wealthy and very British. They're sitting on this beach from their yacht with crewmen in uniform pouring them champagne, and she's a overprotective mother, and you get all these tropes and stereotypes, and I feel like Spielberg ought to be better than that. I mean, that's sort of a cheap it's sort of a cheap emotional jab, and I thought it was kind of an odd way to do that, and when they make Jurassic 3, he's not the director of Jurassic 3. It's almost like they intentionally make that movie. It's a remake of this movie the way it should have been. I mean, that movie isn't perfect either, but it's better than this in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely the weakest out of the Jurassic Park movies, in my opinion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Of the first three, the Park movies.
Of the Park movies, yes.
Okay, yeah. So
it's the weakest of the Park movies.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this is my friends and I, when I was in college, did a Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing where we took our favorite movies to hate, and this was top of the list, like one of the very first movies we watched, and did the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing with, because we all had so much to say about it.
Well, and part of it, I think, is because we want to like it so much. We love Jurassic Park, and it's disappointing when the sequel doesn't live up, especially when like you said before, you can see there's a good movie trying to get out.
Right.
So I just want to highlight some really funny lines of Ian Malcolm from the beginning. So he's debating with John Hammond's nephew, who's now the main antagonist in this. Who's trying to tell Ian that you're just telling your version of the truth, because Ian's out there trying to warn everybody that InGen created this island full of dinosaurs, and InGen has kind of hushed it up, and nobody really believes that there's actual dinosaurs out there, and everyone thinks Ian Malcolm is crazy. And so he says, well, you're just telling your version of the truth. And Malcolm says, there aren't any versions of the truth. And I'm like, wow, like to have that in a Hollywood movie today would mark it as, oh, that's some, ultra conservative movie. I don't want to get political about it, but just that idea that today what we hear is, I have to give my truth. I'm speaking my truth. And so to have this character come in and say, there aren't any versions of the truth, is what happened. I really like that bit.
Mm-hmm.
And And then
it's interesting in light of his character too, who was all about the chaos theory, and which does not lend itself to an absolute truth. And so the first movie, he's all about the chaos theory and how things evolution works and all that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden he's coming into this movie with this totally shifted worldview where he's like, there's no version of the truth. This is something actually did happen.
So the charitable, go ahead.
He's really grown, like you said before. I think not just as a father, but the trauma of what he went through the first time around, we see again and again. It's had an effect on him to kind of mature him, make him like see the world and life more seriously. And I think at least for his character, it works well. And I'm glad he's in this movie among all these other people.
Right. And I feel like the scriptwriter really knew how to write Jeff Goldblum. I mean, Jeff Goldblum really does that sort of dialogue really well. And you gave a charitable explanation for why his character's different. I've seen others say, well, it's just, no, they just screwed up the character and he's different from the was before. But I like your explanation better, which is his experience has changed him and he's grown. And I like the idea that the characters have grown as a result of their experience. So, and another great line is John Hammond says, as he's trying to get him to go to Isla Sorna, and, he's trying to save the dinosaurs from what his nephew and the company, the board of directors, are trying to do to them. He says, I won't make the same mistakes again. And he says, no, you're making all new ones. It's just like, he's like, Ian, sometimes I think he feels like the only sane man in the room, that sort of way he has of him, which is really good.
Some of that are my favorite parts of the movie. Those early scenes of Ian on the subway. Yeah. And that kind of strange guy recognizes him for the guy who claims there's dinosaurs. And then, and the whole scene with John Hammond, it's, I think, some of the funniest parts, the most naturally funny, that don't feel like written jokes. They're just funny characters. And, it really pulls you in a way that sadly some of the dinosaur scenes do not.
Right. One of the aspects of it, like I was talking about, like, the Hammond is trying to save the dinosaurs from his company. He's been ousted as chairman of the board. His nephew's been put in. The board of directors want to exploit the dinosaurs for profit. And I'm thinking to myself, this is essentially the plot of Westworld. Now, I don't know if you've either of you watched Westworld, but this is essentially, you have these creatures that have been created by the company that have minds of their own now and are... They were created to be exploited, but they don't want to be exploited anymore, and now they're dangerous. I just thought that was kind of funny. It's essentially Westworld and Jurassic World. That's kind of the plot of Jurassic World too, right? But we'll come back to that in a couple of movies.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting because it's a fear that's almost ahead of its time because. We look at now, I think we're dealing with all of this fear about artificial intelligence and machine learning rising and, really having to confront some of those deep golden age science fiction tropes. And in Jurassic Park kind of hit it ahead of time. And it said, okay, well, what do we do when we have these natural beings that we've created that now are, maybe they're not as intelligent as we are, but they're still a force to be reckoned with.
Right.
And how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, it was just technology out of control, like RoboCop. Big companies are going to make technology, or Terminator, are going to make technology that's going to get out of control and destroy humans. This is a variation on that. This is, we've created sentient beings, which is kind of like Terminator a little bit, who are independent creatures on their own that we're trying to control and that are dangerous for humanity. I mean, this sort of, and that hasn't changed. We're still making these stories. Like if you look on Netflix, you go to the movie theater, we're still seeing these sorts of things. It's the nature of the technology involved has changed, and the vision of what the future looks like has changed a bit when it's futuristic. But it's still the same fears of science out of control, of corporations out of control. People do. There's a sort of what's the saying? We shouldn't ask whether we can do such a thing, but we should also ask whether we should do such a thing. Right. In fact, that might have been said explicitly in Jurassic 1.
That was Malcolm's line in Jurassic Park 1, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like people say that today as a saying in general. So it's a universal theme now. I think in a lot of entertainment is is it safe? And it's interesting that in the 90s it was genetic engineering, because genetic engineering was still new. I mean, it's a lot more every day. And I mean, it's still cutting edge technology, but the idea of gene editing and that's gene therapies is much more commonplace today. But back then it was scary and new, and cloning, and we cloned Dolly the sheep, and next we're going to clone T-Rex. You know, that whole thing.
I think that idea that our creations could be like stronger than us and smarter than us. When you were talking about the different movies, it took me back to Blade Runner. That kind of that they created these things to do a job, to serve a purpose, but we can't handle them. And it just all those movies really set up sort of biotechnology as the big bad thing for a long time in science fiction.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's died off now, because I think as we've become more aware of the limitations of it, we've started to realize that, it's not the gigantic evil that is really out there, because we're never going to be able to approach some of the levels that you can fantasize about. But what we can do with it is really powerful. And so when we start to look at it more as a tool, and it becomes less scary because we see it more as a tool, I think that's a really interesting transition to start making and start seeing. And so you see a lot less movies that are about it. And even the Jurassic World movies now that are coming out, they are more about the nostalgia for the original series than they are about this fear that we have of genetically engineering dinosaurs that are going to come back and do terrible things to us.
I almost think that the fears have become smaller or more personal, that rather than afraid that it's going to we create something that's going to wipe out humanity, or even just a lot of people, we get afraid of things that are that are more of a personal threat. And I'm thinking of what was that, Ex Machina? Was that the one with Donald Gleason and Oscar Isaac, the two Star Wars guys? Which was an interesting a bit of a psychological thriller, sci-fi to it, and also like several Dark Mirror episodes, that Netflix series. It's the fears, the technological fears, are much more a personal level, on a lower level than on the grand scheme of things. So it's an interesting shift to think about. I'd have to think about that some more. That's an interesting thought to kind of tease out as I look at other movies and things. So we let's get to we get to the island. And the one thing that really struck me as they approach the island is that the island, the way that the cinematography is done, the way it's framed, reminds me very much of, well, frankly, the original Lost World movie from the 1920s, 1929, I think it was. The original King Kong.
King Kong, yeah, that's right. King Kong was mine too, yeah.
I mean, you get this sense of that they're specifically, to excuse the pun, aping these older movies to give a style to this movie, which, at one point they have to go as a group from one side of the island to the other, to someplace else. I mean, that's so King Kong in Lost World. I mean, Peter Jackson does it in his remake of King Kong. I mean, Skull Island does it. I mean, it's another trope. The group of adventurers have to cross through this dangerous place to get to the goal, and some will get picked off along the way. It's just the way it is. So it's got that style to it, which I like.
I think it's interesting to compare it to the arrival in the first movie too. That the first movie is like, look at this beautiful place, and holy cow, there are dinosaurs. There, it's immediately, I think they call it like the Islands of Death or something. When they get there, that this is a bad place. This is
There's
dangerous.
A map. Yeah, they show a map, and one of the islands, it's like in a group of islands, and one of them's called Isla Muertas, Islands of Death. It's like, okay, it's pretty obvious. We should stay away from that place. To see in fact, Malcolm has this line, which is really kind of draws out the contrast that they're making. He's like, yeah, ooh, that's how it starts. But later there's running and screaming. That's when Vince Vaughn's character and Eddie, the late lamented Eddie, they they see the dinosaurs for the first time and are all taken with it, and Malcolm's like, yeah, I've been here. I had that. I bought that ticket. Saw that movie.
He's jaded now. He's no more of the wonder anymore.
Mm-hmm. Then one of the things. Speaking of Malcolm, I kind of get some random thoughts that I want to make sure I'm getting in. So I'm kind of bouncing around. But one of the things about Jeff Goldblum here, especially in this movie and maybe in other movies, he's very much like Jimmy Stewart in his speech mannerisms. Have you ever noticed that? He's kind of got that sort of almost talking to himself bit that Jimmy Stewart did, and he comes off like if Jimmy Stewart was alive today at that age, this is how he would be in this movie. This would be just watch this movie and think of Jimmy Stewart. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I would have to do that now because that's pretty much his speech pattern is like that, where he has those pauses for effect that you're just waiting for the next thing that he says.
Right.
I had a great chance several years ago. I saw The Music Man starring Jeff Goldblum live on stage in Pittsburgh, and it was exactly the same. Like he didn't so much sing as talk like this, and it's partly the character, but I think this is just Jeff Goldblum, and you look at like Thor Ragnarok, and it's just this is the way he acts, and it's funny, it works, and especially in an action movie where he's the leading role, which I guess I never really expected Jeff Goldblum to be in that position. It works well. Yeah.
I mean, Jeff Goldblum is one of those actors who just does himself. He's just himself in everything, and it works. So one of the things, so they meet up with Ian's girlfriend Sarah, who's conveniently his girlfriend, who's a paleontologist from some sort. And she gets mad at, what was it, Nick, who lights the cigarette? Don't light the cigarette. Dinosaurs can smell it from miles away. We're here to observe and document, not interact, says the woman who almost died after touching the baby dinosaur. Like, completely contradictory here. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of indicative of just the sort of the mishmash that sometimes the movie gets into with its different characters. It wants to say one thing, but then play this the other way. And I don't know if the characters are supposed to be self-contradictory. It generally doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like we're just doing and saying things to kind of have a specific plot beat at this moment, and then another plot beat at that moment. It's fine.
Yeah, and that's it shows up the most with with the hunter characters, where you got this like you were talking about. There's this sort of environmentalist bent to it. But then they try and play the noble hunter card a lot, where he's there to hunt the biggest game that he's ever hunted. But then he takes these moments where like it would make sense for him to actually be hunting the big game, and he doesn't do it. He doesn't take the shot, or it's just something ridiculous is happening. And at least one of them, his ammunition's missing because someone took it. But in a couple of others, it's like this was clearly a moment where you should have been the one to save the day, and you bagged the big baddie, but you didn't do it.
Right. Roland is the character, and and I mean this movie is full of good characters wasted, like just not used well. And I'm not sure why. It's almost like they had two different stories they're trying to work with. But Roland was an interesting character. They could have developed him more. He had the sidekick, Ajay, who is his loyal, longtime best friend and hunting partner from India. Well, I don't know that. I read that in a Wikipedia article. The movie doesn't tell me anything except it's his sidekick who like dies like off screen. It's like, what a waste. Like, why was this character even there? I just felt like that was so lost. Peter Stormare was actually well done here. Who played Dieter, who is that character who, I had something. He's the classic case of the idiot who gets poetic justice done on him.
Right.
He zaps the baby dinosaur. It's like, oh, the paleontologist says, oh, the baby dinosaur is not afraid of you because it doesn't know humans. And so he goes, oh yeah, zap. Now he's afraid of humans. And so then later on in the movie, all the little dinosaurs come in and eat him up into little bits, as we know was going to happen. But even that scene takes way too long to develop.
Oh yeah,
It's way too long.
Yeah.
I think it's some other things I wanted to say. Speaking of that paleontologist, I got to throw this little bit in. The paleontologist Burke, working for Hammond's nephew, is dead ringer for Jimmy Akin. You guys,
yes, yes.
I'm like,
oh my gosh,
Akin.
I hadn't thought of it, but you're absolutely right.
Wow.
If you don't listen to our other programs, Jimmy Akin is a frequent co-host of many of our shows, Secrets of Doctor Who, Secrets of Star Trek. He has his show, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Totally looks like Jimmy Akin, like a dead ringer, right down to the hat, the cowboy hat.
I was going to say even the hat.
So
it's a secret history.
So let's move on a little bit. Eddie is a bit of a hero. He saves our crew of Ian and Sarah and Nick Van Owen when the T-Rexes attack the trailer because they have the baby T-Rex in there and they're trying to help it. They don't know that. And I think Eddie is the biggest hero in this movie because even as these two T-Rexes are attacking him, he's still trying to save them. I mean, it is pretty amazing to see. I think Eddie is the hero. I throw it out there. Does anybody else qualify?
I absolutely agree.
One of the better and more intense scenes in the movie too. The whole camper over the side of the cliff and the two T-Rexes and everything.
I mean, there's like 4 moments in that one scene that are just literally cliffhanger. Like you're on the edge of your seat. They get your heart going. When the T-Rexes are pushing it over, when half of it is hanging and Sarah falls but she hits the glass. You don't realize it's the glass, and then Eddie comes and he's trying to pull them up with the rope, and the rope lets go, and then the T-Rexes show up, and then the trailer falls, and they miraculously don't get hit by anything as the trailer falls past them, and they go through the windshield, and they're still hanging on somehow. Not very believable, but let's just go with it. There are dinosaurs. I mean, how believable do you want to be? So it's just it's really a great moment there to see that scene. I'm glad. I know why they saved that scene from the book for this movie. That's for sure. So
his death was the one that was really like it made some sense. Right. they earned that one on screen, I think, in a way that they didn't earn a lot of the other ones.
Right. And you felt it because you kind of connected with Eddie. He was a nice guy. He was their lifeline, with the technology, and all that sort of stuff. And he had saved them. So let's see. They hook up with InGen's group, and then again, stupid, they release the dinosaurs to rampage through the InGen camp and destroy their way of getting off the island. Yeah. And thus they're responsible for the death of everyone who dies from that point on. Am I wrong?
I can't stand Vince Vaughn's character in this movie. Just that, especially when he reveals that I'm the backup plan, that my job is to do, I guess, just Greenpeace stuff like he had done in the past. But
right.
How is this a good idea? And just that kind of like one-note character that isn't really looking around, doesn't have any sort of like, no real human being would think this is a good idea in this situation.
Right down to taking the gunpowder out of Roland's shells. Now, I'm not sure that any handheld gun could take down a T-Rex. You know what I mean? I don't care how big your elephant gun is. Nevertheless, taking the shells out of there, that killed people because it meant the T-Rex could rampage.
Absolutely.
I mean, he is more responsible for more deaths than the InGen people are, and that's just right on screen, and it kind of leads me to wonder, like, are we supposed to see the the radical environmentalist as a bad guy, or the big for-profit corporation that doesn't care about people as a bad guy? They're both bad guys in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think they were trying to split the difference between not saying that there was a good guy in the argument, but
right.
But I mean, even so, everybody has a little bit of logic here. No environmentalist is going to open a cage to let a lion out in the middle of a city because that's not good for anyone in the city, and it's not good for the lion because eventually the lion's going to be shot, and that's it's like he didn't have any compass to make a decision with, really.
Right. So they have this. They trek through the forest. They camp out overnight. As the chivalrous fellows they are, they put Sarah and the girl in the tent. I forget the girl's name, but anyway, Malcolm's daughter. They put them in Kelly. That's right. They put them in the tent. Who is a gymnast, by the way? We find out early on. That won't come up again at all, right?
No.
Not important at all.
Not important detail that's been mentioned very importantly. So they're in this tent, and I just came back from a long trip. Was traveling around the eastern part of the U.S., and we camped in the Great Smoky Mountains and one of the things that they're very sure of telling you is don't leave food out because of bears. Now, if there were T-Rexes in the Great Smokies, I never mind bears. I wouldn't keep food within 100 yards of me. And then she's got like food strewn all over the tent for the T-Rex to come and smell. And so what's Sarah doing? She's shoving it into a bag as the T-Rex is right outside. That ship has sailed, Sarah. That T-Rex is already there.
I don't think a bear bag is going to help them out with the food of a tree.
Yeah, well,
mouth level.
Yes, and of course the bear was looking for the T-Rex was smelling the shirt with the baby T-Rex's blood, which Roland apparently knew it would do. He had seen the blood on Sarah, and that blood inexplicably had not dried for whatever reason. It's magic T-Rex blood that doesn't dry after hours and hours and hours. But never mind, it's movie blood, which doesn't dry. So and so it was smelling the blood, and for some reason, well, we know what the reason is he wanted the T-Rex to follow them so he could kill it or capture it, which he eventually does. But that we never get, there's never a moral payoff on that. Like, hey, you used us as bait for that. Like, it should have been a confrontation. You used my girlfriend and my daughter as bait for the T-Rex. That should have been in there.
Well, and that's something Malcolm would have figured out. You know, that's
right.
Definitely something he would have seen and gathered, and that's one of the things that really bothered me about the InGen / paleontologist Greenpeace kind of group is that it looks like they tried to mash two movies together. Like they couldn't decide, are we going to go with just this InGen story or just this Greenpeace story of saving the dinosaurs? Why not everything? Let's just put it all in together.
Right. It's Safari gone bad. It's King Kong. It's all these movies that we're kind of jamming into one movie and not doing any of them very well, doing them justice. So one of the things that in that scene that happens is they run into the waterfall, and then the T-Rex tries to come in after them. That's actually another one of those scenes from the first. That was supposed to be the first movie. That was from the first book that they brought back. Again, it's a good gag. I mean, it's a good scene to do that.
Makes me think of an amusement park ride.
Oh yeah,
your car's going by the waterfall and the T-Rex head pokes out. That probably exists somewhere.
That would be a great Jurassic Park amusement park ride. Is just to have the T-Rex head pop out of there. Oh man, people would freak out. That's a good one. But don't throw.
It reminds me of the George Lucas Ewoks movie too, where they have that wolf thing that's chasing the kids through the forest, and the kids hide in a tree, and then the wolf thing like comes and tries to get at the kids, and it can't get all the way in.
That's a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. I haven't thought of what was that Ewok Lost World thing since
Ewok Adventure. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Ewok Adventure, man. Next, we'll talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special.
There you go.
It's Life Day. Anyways, back to Jurassic. So the Ian and Sarah and Nick get separated from the InGen crowd, who go running through the grass, and that's where we get everyone's favorite, the Velociraptors show up. The phrase, the line, "Stay out of the high grass," that is one of my catchphrases with my kids. Like when they're going off to play, go, be safe. Don't go in the street. Stay out of the high grass. Just almost no one ever gets it, but once in a while, the usually a dad like looks over and smiles, and I'm like, "Yep, we're on the same page." That's a great line. There is a funny bit that I never got until this time I just watched it. I've seen this movie, half a dozen times at least. Early in the movie, Malcolm criticizes Nick for calling out for Sarah when they get to the island. Sarah Harding! And then Malcolm says, "Do you think there are many Sarahs here? Like, why just call Sarah, right?" Then at the operations center, Malcolm walks up and he's like, "Nick Van Owen!" Like, because there's going to be more than one Nick in the operations center. So we have this, this big set piece of the operations center. Not much, I think, needs to be said about it. We do see Kelly do her gymnastics move on the Velociraptor and kick him out of the side of the building there while she swings on the poles. They managed to escape from the island, and that would normally be the end of the movie, right? But of course it isn't. Yes,
couldn't stop there.
Because that's how the first movie ends, right? No, in this one we get the T-Rex. They're in their infinite wisdom. They've captured the T-Rex, and now they're bringing it to the mainland. Have you not seen King Kong? Like, this is essentially King Kong. So there's so much wrong with this.
Yeah.
The ship, all of the crew on the ship are killed by the T-Rex because it escaped from its confinement. How does the T-Rex get onto the bridge to eat the crew members there, including the guy whose hand is still holding the wheel, even though not the rest of him is gone? How does it get onto the bridge without destroying it? Does the T-Rex shrink? Like, if there were velociraptors, I could buy it.
Exactly.
It's just
wrong. I'm just wondering the intelligence of these sailors, that they are on a ship that has tiny little hallways that you can go and just stand in. You don't even have to do much of anything. You just stand in them.
Right.
And the T-Rex is not going to get to you.
What's it going to do? Walk around the deck? I mean, he's like, "Hi, the T-Rex on the deck." Like, no, let's go hide in the biggest space on board, the cargo hold. That's where we'll be safe. So the T-Rex gets out. And now remember the T-Rex walking through the neighborhood. Do you remember when I was talking about the first movie? The my nightmare after seeing the movie the first time was I was sleeping on the couch, and my nightmare was a T-Rex head coming down to the window. My nightmare was true.
It was real.
It was real. This poor kid is get the T-Rex coming to the window, and like again as a parent, the kid coming in. "Mommy, Daddy, there's a dinosaur out in the backyard." I tell you, don't give him stuff to eat after 8:00. I've been there. There never was actually a dinosaur in our backyard, which is an improvement over this one.
Oh man, no, I don't know. I'd be kind of interested in the dinosaur in the backyard.
But as an example of this movie's darkness is the dog, the dog barking at the dinosaur. We see that the T-Rex ate the dog. He's got the chain between his teeth, and he drops the doghouse, and it crashes. And the clear implication is the dog got ate, and I'm like, wow, that's dark.
Pretty rough.
I mean, I know people get eaten in the first movie and this one, but when it's people's pet dog, it's sort of different.
Yeah, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So we got little kids.
What did the dog do? The dog barked at you. Come on, man.
So we got little kids and pet dogs getting eaten in this movie. This is the problem. There is a great scene where the T-Rex is walking through the streets of San Diego, knocking over buses and stuff like this, where there's a group of Asian men running down the street, kind of looking over their shoulder, yelling and pointing, which is totally a Godzilla movie homage. That whole idea of the giant lizard chomping down the street after a group of Japanese men who are running in fear that's totally a Godzilla movie thing.
I think I would have watched a lot more of this movie or enjoyed more of it if it was this part. Like T-Rex wandering San Diego is pretty interesting and new compared to the original Jurassic Park. These are some of the strongest parts of the movie.
Right, even if there were like a bunch of dinosaurs running around through a city that they had to round up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it would have been really interesting if they had just played the King Kong movie to the hilt. If they had just gone straight with that King Kong theme.
Right.
That would have been perfect.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so, in the end, what do? We get the baby T-Rex. We put it back on board. It lures the daddy Rex back to the cargo hold, where it teaches the baby Rex to fight for itself, to eat up the bad man Ludlow, who gets his poetic justice.
Lawyers and CEOs get eaten by T-Rexes in this movie.
Yes, exactly. As in all Spielberg movies, greedy men die from their own greed, like from the object of their greed. That's a Spielberg thing. And so they package up the T-Rex. We don't just kill it. Apparently, that someone has made the executive decision that no, rather than just dispose of this giant dangerous creature that should not exist, we're going to put it back on the ship and send it back. Now, how much do they pay the crew of the second crew of this same ship? No. The same thing isn't going to happen again.
No, and what security features did they put in place? That's the thing. It's like nothing changed about the ship. It's the exact same situation. Where are we going with this?
Well, what do they do when the ship? When they get the ship to the island?
Exactly. What's the plan on the other end?
You press the button and then we all run for the side. That's the plan. We'll all jump in the water and then we'll leave the ship here or something. I don't know. We're not supposed to think of it. I did like that we got Bernie Shaw from CNN, a little blast from the past nostalgia news journalist, Bernie Shaw doing the voiceover of the live shot of the U.S. Navy escorting this ship back there. Hey, Costa Rica, this is yours. I think you lost this. We'll put this back on your island for you.
Right.
So, and then we have the environmental preservation message: trust in nature, and life finds a way. That's really the message that we've been kind of hammered home for us. And then we end with, for the second movie in a row, we end with a pterodactyl. Without seeing a pterodactyl in the action of the movie, finally we get that payoff in the next movie. In Jurassic 3, we'll see pterodactyls in action. So that's the movie. So in comparison between 1, 2, and we can do a little bit of preview of 3. We can kind of compare 2 to 3. How do you feel 2 compares to 3? We'll start with you, Father.
3 is definitely stronger. I honestly can't really remember the plot of 3 that much right now. I feel like once we get past that original story, they're really grasping for like, what are these movies about? And right. 2 really shows that they just play a lot of the same beats. And I feel like the characters are stronger in 3. This one is just so strange. It's such a middle movie that doesn't really seem like it needs to exist.
Is 3 better because it replaces Ian Malcolm with Sam Elliott's character? Is that an improvement? Thomas, what do you? Father, you go ahead if you got.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe Sam Elliott's a better leading man. But I just feel like the story is so weak in this one that they didn't quite know what to do with it, and they're like, "Well, we just need more dinosaurs," and they did that, and that's always fun to watch.
Yeah.
It lacked focus. I think that's really the big problem with this one is the focus just was there wasn't a focus. There was, like you were saying, there's the safari gone wrong. There's the King Kong. There's the parent child. There's the dirty CEO, and it really just never finds itself because there's so much that it's trying to do. And I don't know if it's because Spielberg wasn't thinking that he was going to get another shot at this or that this was going to go on to another movie. And so he wanted to try and get everything he could in, or if it just, there was just too much that they wanted to try and put into this movie.
Right. I almost feel like it was, he didn't really want to do this movie, but because it was a sequel to one of his biggest movies, he had to be the one to do it. I kind of feel like that was on the table. And so he didn't have the same focus that he had with the first one. I feel like if this didn't have the bit in San Diego, this would be even worse. Like if this movie were just what happened on the island, we would say this is a bad movie. The stuff in San Diego kind of saves a little bit because it's new it's different, it's exciting, and it's sort of fun, and that's good. But I think it's not enough to save the whole movie. And then you have Jeff Goldblum. I think he's funny. I think he's good, but I don't think he carries the action the way like Sam Elliott did in the first one or in the third one. He's really the protagonist in that one. He's good as sort of the snarky guy on the side, but not necessarily as he's too nervous to like he kind of becomes one note the whole time, which is see, I told you this is a bad place and it's going to hurt us. I mean, that's just like it becomes his note.
He didn't want to go there. He was right, and it didn't work out.
Right. And I think that's, you mentioned earlier that it's almost like the third movie is a remake of this one to try and do what this one did wrong, right, and correct it. Right.
Right.
And it really does feel like that. It feels like the third movie is a rehash of the second movie, but done a little bit better.
Yeah. If I recall, Jurassic 3 was directed by, Joe Johnston directed that. So, and in fact, he had wanted to direct this one. And when Spielberg said, no, I'll do it, then Spielberg took over and Joe Johnston got the third one. So there may be more to that than even we even thought. Like this third one is the sequel that Joe Johnston wanted to make, and in fact, right. I don't even think that there's hardly any reference to this movie in the third one. I don't think there's much at all. It's kind of interesting that I don't think there's any reference to this. We're obviously going to watch the third one soon, and we'll talk about it then. But and then we wait after that. Was it 15 years for Jurassic World, where they learn the same lessons all over again? Mm-hmm. So, is there anything left to say about this movie, guys? Thomas, was there anything left that you said about Jurassic 2?
I really like, again, I think this movie strikes the note at the end, and it waits until the very, very end to do it, of life finding a way, and that being an okay thing. Like, it's good. It's not, right. It's not, even as horrible and as terrifying as these creatures are, them still existing and living despite our best efforts is a good thing.
Right. I like also that the message of the T-Rexes are animals. The dinosaurs are animals. They're not monsters. They're not evil in and of themselves. They are, in fact, are parents who nurture their young like other animals do. And it's sort of I think in some ways trying to redeem dinosaurs from the terrible lizard monster sort of idea that has grown up about them. That frankly Jurassic Park is partly responsible for propagating in the first place. But I like that idea too, that they are just big animals who walk the earth at one point. Father, did you have any last thoughts on it?
Yeah, kind of going off of that. In the first movie, humanity kind of intrudes on their domain and they act like animals. And that's what's so great about the end of this one, is that this crazy big animal that shouldn't be in San Diego has to face with humanity and its domain. And I think that's why it's such a powerful segment of the movie, because it flips it around. And right. It sounds like, I didn't see the most recent Jurassic World, but it sounds like that's where things are heading. And I find that much more interesting than just going to another island and going to another island.
Right. And I just want the one last note from me too is the fact that it's called Jurassic Park: The Lost World, or actually it's flip that around. It's Jurassic World: The Lost Park. I mean, The Lost World Jurassic Park is its technical name.
There you
go. Spielberg was making a point that he was really wanted to base this off of the original The Lost World movies from the 1920s. That and that we're to watch this in that vein. Whether he's successful or not, well, I'll let others be the judge of that as well. I don't think this was a great movie. It's worth watching. I've watched it half a dozen times, like all the movies. So that's what I have. So that's it from us. So folks, what do you think of Jurassic Park 2, Electric Boogaloo, or Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page. Just look for SQPN on Facebook and leave us some feedback on the related post there for the show. And send us an email if you'd like to secrets@sqpn.com. You can find relevant links for our discussion on our show notes on sqpn.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or TuneIn. You can also listen to it as a YouTube video, if you'd like, on our YouTube channel. And remember to write a review, like, comment, share, to help us grow our audience and reach more people with our content that we hope you're enjoying. Until next time, Father Michael Gossett, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Jurassic Park 2.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thomas and Herho, thank you as well.
I appreciate it.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest. And remember, don't go in the long grass.